I would kill to be that cool. The baggy jeans were just the right amount of baggy. The Abercrombie & Fitch long sleeve with arbitrary line across the middle was just the right amount of line. The skate-style Vans shoes were just the right amount of skate. The lightweight Tommy Hilfiger windbreaker was just the right amount of Tommy. The camouflage backpack with the Grateful Dead patches was just the right amount of patchy and dead. The backwards Milwaukee Brewers baseball cap from Lids was just the right amount of backwards. The frosted blonde tips underneath that Milwaukee Brewers backwards cap were just the right amount of tip blonde. Spacey was the coolest person I had ever seen. It was beyond love. It was infatuation. And his locker was 5 feet away from mine. This had to be a sign. From above. Or below, depending on how this all worked out. Either way, it was only a matter of time until I threw caution to the wind and told him about my love, and that the only correct course of action was for us to spend the rest of our lives together hanging out at the mall, eating Auntie Anne's pretzels. But first,
I need a smoke.
The glorious vixen interrupting my view of Spacey was my bestie for life, Lindsay. She was in the midst of making me addicted to cigarettes, and I loved her for it. We would sneak off school grounds once or twice per day to have a smoke and gab. It was divine, and today would be no different. At least, that's what I thought, until she told me the news.
My cousin got the tape.
I clutched my imaginary pearls. I knew what she meant. Anyone in our school would have known. Heck, anyone in our entire town would have known what she meant. Lindsay, my glorious vixen bestie, her cousin had the tape. The tape. The tape to end all tapes. You're kidding, I said, praying that she was not.
Super serial.
She said. There were 4 levels of seriousness. Level 1, serious. Level 2, serial. Level 3, super serious. And the most serious level, level 4, super serial. We were on level 4. I was not afraid of heights, but level 4 was beyond frightening. She wasn't kidding. She had, by extension of her cousin, had the tape. The tape, as legend has it, revolved around a woman named Gertrude Charon. She lived on the outskirts of our town. A mythos had begun to build around her because, allegedly, she had devoted her life to witchcraft. This all seemed like good, harmless fun at first. The kinds of tales you tell your children to make sure they don't stray too far from home late at night. Or else, Gertrude would snatch you up, put you into one of her stews. I'd be lying if it didn't work on me as a child. I never biked anywhere near Gertrude Street. I remember seeing a kid once get dared to go ring her doorbell, and he did. She never answered the door, but the kid who rang the doorbell, he missed a week of school for what my friend told me was, quote, a viral infection. Who gets sick from ringing a doorbell? After that, the legend of Gertrude only grew. It seemed to be all in good fun, the legend of Gertrude. She mostly kept to herself. Occasionally, she would be spotted in town. Nobody ever dared speak to her. Some of the more religious folks in town attempted to confront her once. Not that they had a soapbox of nobility to stand on. There seemed to be a fine line between crazies. Still, since she never really interfered with anyone's life, it was pretty harmless. This mysterious, sexy boogie lady who kept you up at night. And then, almost 1 year ago exactly, Gertrude had a party. 13 bodies. Mass suicide at her house. On her big lawn, to be specific. Since then, there had been whispers around town that Gertrude had recorded her speech before they all went to the other side. Why, you ask, did she record it? Well, only those special enough to listen to the tape could know. If such a tape existed, that is. This was catnip for local gossip. Everyone in town was intrigued, especially curious teenagers such as myself and Lindsay, who had a strong attraction towards horror, the occult, and potentially misunderstood older women. The bodies belonged to some of the more odd folks in town, the kinds of people who felt like extras in your movie. You would see them sometimes out and about, but you never knew their names. The only thing the other 12 people had in common was that they lived lives of solitude, just like Gertrude. When and how they met was a mystery. Everything about Gertrude was a mystery, including the supposed tape, which I just learned was real. Lindsay continued as I hung on her every word.
My cousin, Shane, she's dating a cop. Apparently this cop says the tape is real, and he told my cousin that he could make a copy so she can listen to it.
All of my horribly twisted dreams had come true. Not that I'm pro-mass suicide, but would you be able to resist listening to a tape which was, allegedly, spearheaded by Satan? No, of course not. Especially if you grew up in my town, Old Glenville. OG was one of those towns that got pounded by snowstorms every winter, and the creme de la creme was watching football games on Sundays in a dive bar. Some kids dream of becoming Broadway stars or astronauts. I dreamt of getting a tan, somewhere far, far away. That's how low my aspirational bar was. I would be graduating from high school in approximately 6 months, but that felt like infinity. Days in my town were so repetitive. Weeks blurred into months. Months dissolved into years. Thank God for Lindsay. We met in middle school. It was Halloween, and everyone was allowed to dress up. So we both came as Winona Ryder from Beetlejuice. Lindsay was oohed and awed. I was not. The looks shot my way were a bit more perplexed and aghast. Perhaps one day, when it was not 1993, and I was not living in Old Glenville, things would be better, and my love for Winona would be appreciated. That day was not today. However, things were most certainly looking up due to the possibility of this tape ending up in our hands. Lindsay, I'm about to ask you the most important question that anyone has ever asked another person. Can we get the tape and listen to it? She smiled. Oh my God. For the first time ever, I was sweating.
If anyone finds out, we're dead.
The streets are alive with the force we can't tame. I feel the heat rise underneath this wild sky. As the night calls us, we chase the unknown vice. Where will the night take us? Is it lost or found? With the music playing loud, we'll dance on sacred ground.
I had never been more terrified or turned on. Shane, Lindsay's cousin, was holding it, the tape. My entire life had become accustomed to crushing disappointment, and now I was behind the curtain of the only interesting thing to have ever happened in my town and potentially the world. Shane was a couple years older, old enough to buy beer, legally, without a laughably bad fake ID. She was the one who schooled Lindsay on the do's and don'ts of getting intimate with boys. This was then relayed to me by Lindsay. It was the closest document I had to the Bible, the scandalous tips on how to be a generous lover. I had to ask Shane, why would this cop make a copy of the tape? Doesn't he know he'll get fired if anyone finds out, like, that there's a copy of it? Shane just smiled and said,
Men.
As a man, I had no comeback. She summed it up beautifully. The officer had risked his job and reputation to get laid, and that felt par for the cause of humanity. Who was I to quibble? Talk about getting an inside scoop. This was a scoop into the devil himself, or herself. Either way, the tape was real, and we had it.
I'll catch you later. I have to go meet Barney for an afternoon delight.
I was in disbelief. Wait, you're not gonna listen with us? Shane explained that anything involving the devil was not her cup of tea. But if me and Lindsay wanted to get ourselves cursed, by all means, have at it. Shane then wished us well and reiterated that if anyone ever finds out, we're all dead. Me and Lindsay both thanked her profusely and agreed that death seemed to be an appropriate punishment for anyone ever finding out. Now all we had to do was find a place to be alone with it. It, as if it was a person. Some living, breathing entity. After brief negotiations, we agreed the best place was my basement. My parents were never home until 7 or 8, which gave us a solid 4 hours to be alone with whatever the literal hell was on this thing. Do we get snacks? Soda? Weed? So many things to consider. What were the right circumstances for this monumental event? How does one prepare for a potential calamity of the highest order?
Well,
Lindsay said.
we could just listen to the tape.
We turned off the lights and turned on a tiny lamp. It was the size of my elbow, but it packed a vibrant orange punch. That was all we had. Me, Lindsay, my tiny orange lamp, and the tape. I placed it into my Sony boombox and then shut it closed. My finger reached for the play button until I heard,
Wait,
Lindsay seemed nervous. Lindsay was never nervous. Her lack of fear was one of the 75 top reasons I loved her. What? I said. What is it? Lindsay was staring at the tape, the top of which was still visible as it sat inside my boombox. Her mouth was open, but she seemed unable to form words. She took a deep breath, but as the air pushed out of her mouth, it came out in stuttered fragments. She was rubbing her hands together as if she was sitting around a campfire. It was just jarring to see my fearless bestie so fragile. I always felt as though I were made of glass compared with Lindsay, and now here I was, having to console her. Are you okay? Her head was slowly swaying back and forth, still staring at the tape. Now she was clutching the neck of her black turtleneck and tugging at it for air.
I can't.
She said, standing up. I stood up too. You can't? She seemed dizzy. When she got up, her back slid away from me as she sat on the edge of my long brown-shaped basement couch, closing her eyes and trying to collect herself. Lindsay, I told her. We've been talking about this for a year, and now we have it. Don't you want to know what's on there? You're not actually, scared, are you? She didn't say anything. She just shook her head, and then reached for the boombox. I politely stood in her way and asked what she was doing. She took a beat and then tried again. I somewhat less politely got in her way again. Within 10 seconds, we were now wrestling on the ground as I tried to protect my boombox I'd gotten for my 16th birthday. If Lindsay liked gay men and I liked women, this could have been hot. However, since neither of those things were true, it was nothing more than a very awkward wrestling match between two besties. It was so absurd that I started laughing uncontrollably. Not since the previous weekend, when we had gotten stoned and watched Cliffhanger, had I laughed this hard. When the dust settled, I realized that none of that had been a joke. Lindsay was legitimately trying to get the tape, and now seemed distraught that I didn't want her to have it. She spoke.
This is wrong. This is all wrong. Don't you hear that?
Hear what? I asked her. She clamped her hands over her ears and fell to her knees. Lindsay was an extraordinary actress. It was another one of the top 75 things I loved about her. She had a magnificent theatrical presence. Picture Julia Roberts, but with talent. That was Lindsay. She could do mimicry like no other. I assumed all of this was just for show, a glorious preamble to help set the satanic mood. But there was something about her that just seemed off. Lindsay, I told her, stop messing around. Are you serious? She took a beat and said,
Super cereal.
I waited for a smile and a laugh. Instead, I got the cold shoulder. She put on her coat and walked up my basement stairs. I heard the door shut from all the way down here. I was in shock. If there's anything I'd like you to know about me and Lindsay, it's that our threshold for horror was top-notch. I'm not trying to toot our own horns, but me and Lindsay had seen every horror movie you could imagine. This was the perk of working at the video store. You watch everything. And by everything, I mean horror movies. It was the best job I had ever had. It was also the only job I had ever had, which was in danger of ending because of a new chain called Redline Video, which was very interested in buying us out. Lindsay saw the writing on the wall way before me. She knew mom and pop shops always bite the capitalist bullet eventually. Lindsay was right about everything, which begged the question, does that mean I shouldn't either? I was now sitting in my dark basement alone with my lamp, my boombox, and the tape. I can't believe she left. I can't believe I was mad at Lindsay. I'd never been mad at Lindsay. Being mad seemed like something other people did. The dum-dums. This was a new emotion. I was so confused, and that just made me more upset. Not understanding how she could cave so easily. Or was this all part of the prank? The cop, the cuz... Of course, I thought. The tape's probably gonna be Lindsay farting. That makes sense. Way more sense than a cop risking his job to get laid. Sure, men place sex above everything else in life, but he has to know that giving the tape to someone meant they would make a copy, and then that person would make a copy, and before you know, the entire town would be infested with people listening to the words of Lucifer. All right, I thought, I'll be the punchline. So without further ado, it was the best sleep of my life. Objectively, this should not have been the case. The tape, as I found out during the previous afternoon, was not a prank. It was not, as I assumed, Lindsay or her cousin farting. No, it was Gertrude. Well, at first it was other people, some male, some female, lightly chanting in unison. That went on for about 2 minutes. Everything went silent really quickly. And then Gertrude started talking. She spoke about how they were moving on to a better place, where fear and pain did not exist, a place where the horrors of man could not consume their purity. I'd be lying if I said she didn't have some decent points. Considering the circumstances, I mean. She definitely had a calming tone, the way her words seemed to sort of float. I could feel them. And I wasn't even in the room. After 5 or 6 minutes, she stopped talking, told them all to raise their glasses, and then they drank. And there wasn't a bunch of loud thumps. People didn't just drop dead and hit the floor, no. The room just went silent for about 2 minutes until the very end. I heard some light whispering. I couldn't make that part out. I tried. I listened to it a bunch of times in a row, but it was too quick and the language was way off my radar. I had taken 6 years of Spanish, and the best I could do was, ¿Dónde está la biblioteca? Despite my worldly persona, being a dual linguist was a bit beyond my capabilities. The tape didn't disappoint. Those were, by all accounts, real people during their last moments. Yet, for some reason, I wasn't shaken by any of this. Maybe it was how calm they all were. If they believed this would bring them peace, well, there's nothing horrible about that, right? It was 11 minutes and 6 seconds total. I couldn't wait to tell Lindsay. I tried calling her several times that night, but there was no answer at her house. She was probably sneaking away with Carlin Bassano, star wide receiver of the football team. Jocks love goth girls. I don't know much, but I can tell you that. Dinner that night was as uneventful as ever. At one point during the meandering conversation that was my family recounting their day, I contemplated being honest, telling my parents that I had been given this tape, telling them what I heard on the tape, telling them how moving I found the tape. This could have led to the most lively, intoxicating conversation me and my parents ever had. Instead, when they asked me how my day was, I just said, fine, as I had done the previous 2,000 family dinners. Then I asked if we had any ice cream left. Poor parents. If they only knew the real, repressed answers to the question, how was your day? The ice cream hit me like a ton of bricks. I was fast asleep by 9 o'clock. I felt like as soon as I hit the pillow, I was waking up for school. 10 hours of sleep on a weekday. Unheard of. Normally I was falling asleep closer to midnight, thanks to my late calls with Lindsay, or sneaking downstairs for a new horror movie. A good night's sleep was low on my priority list. Thanks to Gertrude's bizarrely relaxing cadence, I conked out. Around 7:30, it became apparent that Lindsay was not picking me up. Okay, now I was starting to get peeved. How far were we going to take this? My dad was not happy to give me a ride, even though it was technically on his way. It gave us more time to talk. He tried to hide our lack of conversation by turning on the radio, but every station was static. He gave it a couple of love taps with the bottom of his palm, but since he's not the Fonz, it didn't work. And Lindsay was MIA. We had a couple home bases that one of us could usually find the other. Behind the gym near the big rock, the art department bathroom, the teacher's lounge vending machine. These were designated spots to locate the other person, seeing as how there was no easier way to communicate at the time. Sometimes we would leave each other little notes. Today, not the case. Lindsay was nowhere to be seen or found. I was standing by my locker with zero interest in attending my first class. Math. Ugh. It was a very blue morning. Until I heard a nearby locker close, followed by...
Nice shirt.
Oh my god. Spacey. Glenn Spaceman. Spacey for short. Spacey if you were his friend or girlfriend or secret admirer. I knew the voice. Hell, I even knew the smell before I heard the voice. It was 100% Spacey, and he was 1000% talking to me. What's that? I said, as if I were asking him what a shirt was.
Your shirt.
He said,
I love Nirvana.
I'd love to tell you I had a less obvious favorite band than Nirvana, but I didn't. They were groundbreaking, life-altering, and led me to a lower plane of euphoric melancholy that I had never known existed. Hate me if you want, but I love Nirvana more than any other band. Ever. They rock! As soon as the words left my mouth, I wanted to crawl into a hole and die. No, dying was too simple. I deserved to crawl into a hole and remain alive. Just long enough for fire ants to eat my pathetic bones, one by pathetic one. And then he said it, the words I had been dreaming to hear. I didn't even know they were possible in this or any other life.
Make me a mix.
He smiled again. Before walking away, I had reached a mountaintop. This was, without question, the greatest moment of my life, and everything that had ever happened moving forward would pale in comparison. The only direction ahead is down. A mix. The words echoed in my heart. Why would Spacey ask me to make a mix? Are my feelings of desire a two-way street? Oh my god. I took pride in my gaydar. Lindsay said my exceptional gaydar was one of the top 75 things she loved about me. But I had never suspected Spacey of playing on my team. He always had girlfriends and bro friends. How could I not have known this was a possibility? Or did I? Perhaps that was part of the attraction. Something deep beneath the jock's surface, waiting to be let out into my Winona-loving arms. How could I be expected to concentrate on anything else? The rest of the day would be mapping out the perfect Nirvana mixtape. The future of our love and potentially the human race depends on it. Math class, Spanish class, gym, lunch, it didn't matter where I was or what I was doing. The rest of my day was figuring out the tracks. It had to be perfect. This was a very delicate sandbox I was playing in. I had to walk a fine line between inviting, yet distant. I had at the very least to consider the possibility that Spacey was just a really decent guy. That's how he got class president. Every section of the cafeteria liked Spacey. He had cross-cafeteria appeal. Here I was, Mrs. Class President. First class president. Whatever. Where the hell was Lindsay when I most needed her? With no help from Lindsay or anyone else, I had the track listing. A seamless blend of all three albums. Bleach, Nevermind, In Utero, ending with All Apologies. For my money, the most beautifully sad song ever created. Anytime I wanted to sink into a blue lagoon, I would listen to All Apologies, and suddenly the world became the perfect color. And yet, something was missing. It was too, clean. I needed a surprise, something to distance myself from the other mixtapes that had been made for him. This might be my only chance, ever, to stand out. From the cheerleaders, the bro friends, the other secret admirers. I needed Gertrude. Apologies to all apologies. My mixtape would end with Gertrude. I nearly fainted, patting myself on the back. Eat your heart out, creme de la creme. There was now a new picture in the dictionary to define you. Gertrude, whoever she was, or whatever she looked like. Her hypnotic voice would end my mixtape, and Spacey would be smitten. I wrote the track listing on the back of the tape. As soon as I got to the bottom line and the letter G started guiding my pen, I almost puked from excitement. I pictured his face as he put two and two together. The name, the voice, the speech. Who is this majestic locker neighbor, and how did he acquire the tape of legend? How would I reward this majestic man for bestowing this gift upon me? We would have to get majestically married, immediately. Somewhere far away where tanning is not only an option, but a requirement. To calm myself down, I listened to the tape. Not my mix. Gertrude. It slid me into a peaceful slumber, so I hoped it would do it again. Which it did. Some people need a glass of wine to feel relaxed at night, or chamomile tea. I, apparently, needed an occult preaching the joy of death to guide us to the burning bright light. It worked. Babies don't sleep this well. The hardest time to play it cool is when you have to be cool. Lindsay had been MIA again. When I tried calling her house last night, there was no answer. If I was not on the verge of nuptials with Spacey, I would have been more concerned about Lindsay. Although, to be fair, she had ditched me during the apex of our horror appreciation. I was standing by my locker, very slowly gathering my books. I did this over and over again for about 10 minutes before the first class of the day was going to start. I tried not to look for him. Play it cool. What would Winona do?
Hey!
It was brief, passing, but it was the voice, Spacey. I turned. He was nodding and smiling as he opened his locker. I tried to match his "Hey!" with an "Hey!" of my own. And then I held it up. Made you a mix. I said it in the timbre of a bro friend.
Huh?
He said, "Nirvana," I told him, casually hiding my freak out.
Oh!
He said, smiling and nodding in that glorious Spacey way. He was now walking over to me. Oh my God. We were within 3 feet. He was reaching his hand out towards my hand. He took the tape. I was frozen in ember. He was looking at the tape. My tape. Our tape.
Sweet!
He said.
Thanks, dude.
No, prob, I told him. Prob felt cooler than problem. Like, I'm too chill to spell out full words.
What's Gertrude?
I don't know how I did it, but I did. It was the perfect choreography of nonchalant physical response to his question. I turned, ever so slightly, and while closing my locker, I uttered the words, "Bonus track." Spacey's eyebrows raised, intrigued. His nodding was extra naughty.
Sweet!
He said,
Thanks, dude.
and just like that, I walked away. Why had nobody filmed that exchange? Shouldn't humans know what it looks like to be perfect in moments of seduction? Physically, I was at school, but spiritually, I was now on another plane of existence. I aimlessly floated from one class to another, failing to take in anything that was being told to me. I couldn't even eat lunch. I went outside to the rock behind the gym and smoked 6 cigarettes. I made James Dean look like Pee Wee Herman. Now was the hard part. Waiting. I couldn't just ask him if he listened to it the next time I saw him. I had to wait for him to approach me. Seduction 101. Never seem desperate. One of the more enduring bits of wisdom Lindsay impressed upon me. She knew how to play it cool. She could wait. She was also missing. I went to her house after school to ask her to be my maid of honor, and there was nobody there. I had so much built-up joy and nowhere to put it. Does this mean I need a new best friend? Surely Spacey would have friends I would have to communicate with, but none of them would be as cool as Lindsay, as funny as Lindsay, as appreciative of John Carpenter as Lindsay. Where was she? Beyond helping me sleep, Gertrude's voice helped me to pass the time. I found I could listen to it on repeat, and time would start to eat itself, almost. The sun passed before I knew it, and I was back in bed, dreaming of the next day. Would they cancel school in my honor? Would they announce me as valedictorian and take my picture for the paper? Everything was on the table. Dad was becoming annoyed at having to take me to school for the third straight day. I suggested an alternative, getting me a car. He said, "Good one, Buster," as if teenagers getting a car was only an option in science fiction movies. I braced myself for having to sign autographs immediately upon my arrival, having now ascended to role model for all my fellow classmates or whatever. Before I got out, I told my dad to get his radio fixed. The thought of another morning ride without music made me shudder, and I was past shuddering. So much of my pre-Gertrude life had been steeped in shuddering, and I was digging this newfound bliss. It suited me nicely. I didn't notice right away the quiet. Normally, as soon as my feet hit the crosswalk out in front of the school, indecipherable chatter flying in from every direction. Today, that was not the case. The first person I saw, sitting alone, listening to something on their portable tape player, was sitting to the right of the front entrance doors, alone on the grass, staring down at the back of their cassette player. This turned out not to be an exception. Rather than standing against the locker in groups and talking to each other, everyone seemed to be sitting alone, listening to something on their headphones and staring at the back of their cassette holder. It felt isolating. I waited by my locker for Spacey, and occasionally someone would walk by quietly, staring at their cassette holder, listening to something on their headphones. I waited for as long as I could. Spacey never showed. I was already 5 minutes late for class. When I walked in, every single student was staring at their cassette holder, listening to something on their headphones. The teacher asked them to put their tape players away, and they did. There was a palpable lack of connection between my teacher and the students. They seemed to be somewhere else, even more than usual. The rest of the day felt muted, as if someone had dimmed all the lights. I would have cared more, but my mind was still on Spacey. Where the hell was he? Where the hell was Lindsay? Where was this party, and why had I not been invited? The quiet was starting to tear at me in a way it never had before. Maybe if I could just listen to Gertrude again, she would make it better. And then I wouldn't have to be alone with myself. Even smoking didn't help. What kind of a world was this where smoking made me feel worse? As soon as I got home, I put the tape back on. I couldn't even move. I just lay there in bed, listening to the tape over and over and over. I felt good again. Happy. Who needs friends when you've got Gertrude?
The streets are hot, a fever in the night. You feel the beat, it's the dance beneath the lights. Whispers in the alleys, secrets to unfold. We'll take a chance, let our dreams be bold. The tide is low, but our hearts are high. Through the shadows we will learn to fly. Where will the night take us? Who can say? Let the music guide us as we lose our way. We're living for the moment, feeling alive. Lost in the rhythm, we can thrive. The city's pulse is calling, hear the sound. Together we'll embrace what we found. Neon lights are shining, painting the sky. With every heartbeat, we're reaching for the high. The magic's in the air, electric and bright. With every step we take, we ignite the night. We'll chase the dawn, leaving worries behind. In this endless dance for a love redefined. So take my hand, let the story unfold. With every beat, we'll live to be bold. We're living for the moment, feeling alive. Lost in the rhythm, we can thrive. The city's pulse is calling, hear the sound. Together we'll embrace what we and the stars light up the open sea. In the heart of the night, it's you and me. We'll find our way through the fire and storm. Together we'll rise, this love keeps us warm. We're living for the moment, feeling alive. Lost is falling. Hear the sound. Together we'll embrace what we